All right. Hi, everyone. My name is MosesSamPaul. I'm going to be talking about the open protocol stack within third pillar, the third layer. As you know, the first one is value capture protocol. The second one is Wellbeing protocol. And the third one is DAOcommons. Now, what is DAOcommons? DAOcommons is an open protocol to help anyone build open and sustainable skill-based communities. Now, if you look at the way that organizations are evolving, the future of organizations is not going to be 10,000 member or like 100,000 member organizations. It's going to be small and it'll be structured around skills, and people will come together, work on a project and come together, skill themselves and come together to build the community itself, because the time is essentially validated to the extent that every single minute that they put within a community essentially goes into an incentivization model so that they get it back as well. Now, let me quickly remind you, the whole third pillar protocol stack exists because for anything of value to be created, you need capital, labor, and productivity. The frictionless movement of capital is kind of sorted to the extent that once a value for something is created, you can leverage it all the way up to 100x. And in 24/7 crypto markets, or 50x in like traditional USA F&O markets, and 20x if you're thinking about an Indian F&O market. So this is the most important piece, or the final piece that kind of brings together people, because value capture talks about the transaction level, the well-being protocol talks about from an individual standpoint, and DAOcommons essentially talks about it from an organizational standpoint. So let me quickly run you through the site. The problem that we're essentially solving is the current, like I was saying, the current organization structure needs a revamp to usher in the future of work. And the future of work can't be just gig-based. And the reason being, we'll come to that in a bit, but when you look at the current ways that DAOs are working and being touted as the future of work, because of blockchain and the new tools essentially always transform the way we work, right? The plow turned hunters and gatherers into farmers. The spinning jenny turned power loomers into factory workers. Industrial automation and computers turned factory workers into office dwellers, which is where we are currently. And like certain states and certain segments, the internet fundamentally changed how we got the work done as well. Especially in Web3 world, like there's like remote jobs, like you are working with, so let's say you're from India, you're working with someone in the US, Canada, whatnot, right? Like people are still collaborating, but it comes with certain sets of problems, right? Members join just for most of the time, they just join for token airdrops. Decision making becomes an issue because of the decentralized nature. It reminds me of the code. If you don't want anything to be done, you give it to a committee, with everyone having equal voting share and rights, right? And so the way to mitigate that was proposals, but then that is again based on the a stake a person holds within the community. So now you can see how big whales are able to sway decision making in their favor. Also, last two important things that we really feel is the problem is lack of real identities. You talk to like public private key addresses and there is no real purpose. While we were doing some research, we found this nice article by Bob Greendale on TechCrunch, where he talked about, if a DAO cannot figure out when a person needs a rest day for their well-being, then what's the point of these things, right? Then you'll essentially be replicating the same organizational structure on a smart contract. So basically adding fuel to the fire. So for us to really understand what are the problems the future organization structure has to solve, we have to think about future of work, and that has these problems from both the perspective. An employer perspective is like there is verification friction. I don't know if the person that I'm talking to is who they claim that they are. Validation friction is the skill that they have. Can it be validated without me going through hundreds of iterations of interviews or hackathons and whatnot? Third one is search and match. I still have to go and put on LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, whatnot, right? Like Twitter also now. So everything is becoming a job search mechanism. And the fourth and main thing is you can get a like small projects done, like logo creation can be done, but you cannot run your entire growth function or marketing function through a gig platform. This is from an employer perspective or skill seeker perspective. Now, from the individual who's skill offering, the real thing is you're working alone. So there is a problem of social reclusion, it's anxiety about future projects, lack of career progression, and access to financial services. When I say uh, access at the same, let's say, interest rate a person who is working for a large company would get, right? So this is where we come in. Why do you have to trust us, right? Like we are having a protocol. We're going to show it you in a bit. So it's essentially an output of experimenting with different skill-based communities. So each of these things, like Quantum Computing India, Mad About Growth, Stranger Sapiens, Stop Being Boring, Assembly, ICAM, all these things are individual communities that we have like set up in the last 2.5 years since the lockdown. And certain things are hard skill based, like Quantum and Mad About Growth. Stop Being Boring is soft skills improvement through performing arts, so essentially soft skill based. Assembly is also hard skill based. ICAM is also hard skill based, and Stranger Sapiens is essentially an well-being thing, but mostly focused on productivity. Now, so the protocol is essentially this, because a community as a term has been abused kind of thing. A bunch of people coming together is a community, but that's not really true, right? Like what's the best way, or what's the fundamental thing that brings people together is skill. Think about it. Our forefathers were called hunters and gatherers first. They were not called like the space where they're coming from. That came later because we were moving around. We were a nomadic people. And if you look at the Indian caste system or like the Varna system, that is again structured based on the skill that a particular community holds. So, and this idea applies when you really look at it from a microcosm of an economy standpoint, which is where the name third pillar comes in, where we look at how the state and the market have left the communities behind, which means community acts as a balance between the state and the market, right? So how can it do? Because at the end of the day, the production function just has capital, labor, and productivity. And we have been talking about how capital productivity has been very efficient. Like if we all agree that Bitcoin is the currency, then that's the most frictionless way to move money ever. And we say, no, I need security, I need some kind of government backing. Then UPI, United Payment Interfaces, is the best example of how frictionless capital can move around. But the same thing hasn't been happening in labor. And labor's productivity, which is well-being, if you reframe it properly, and well-being protocol essentially exists for that. So if you look at it from that perspective, when we say a community as a balance between state and market, and if you look at capital as a proxy of the demand side or the market side, and labor as a proxy of the state, and productivity is something that cuts across these two things, where is community coming in, right? From an economic standpoint, it's not mathematically available in any economic books. So when we spend like so much time thinking about this, and finally when we got after reading the third pillar book and the microcosm of an economy, like an entire economy shrunk down to a smaller space, which is what the book talks about. And when we apply it to skill, then what you're looking at essentially emerges automatically. So the people system or the supply system or the skilling system, that's one side, which is a representation of labor. And the money or the demand or the growth system is a representation of the capital factor. And productivity essentially is the processes and the operating system within a community. So I'll take you guys one by one. So skilling system, when a person joins a community, a real world identity is created, right? And we give a baselining form to them so we understand in what level this particular person stands within a skill of that community. For example, in Mad About Growth, let's say my skill level is 8, and I should be able to justify why my skill level is 8 based on what we are going to see, which is learning time, performing time, and community building time. And my past experiences are also taken into account. So when you join a community, you're not always starting at level 0. There is a way for you to enter at different levels based on the baselining form that the community would come up with. And that is a big process in itself, because you need to have a skill system in place. All right. So for example, this is my profile page within Mad About Growth, and my skill system the community skill system looks like this, with different progression levels from all the way from 0 to 10. And what are the skills that you're getting when you spend certain number of community hours, certain number of learning hours, certain number of performing hours, right? And once I keep logging my work in the way that value capture protocol talks about, then my skills are validated and moved into the blockchain layer that we have currently. So this is a very fundamental way of looking at the skill system. There are more nuances to that, but like as everything, we evolve as we go along. So the baselining and the identity is explained now. So how does a person, basically the time that a person spends within a community with learning, performing, a community building happens through the skilling side, and performing is coming from the jobs and the gig side, which I'll explain a bit, and the community building side. So first, skilling. A person is either learning through a structured way or an unstructured way. And structured way comes through like courses, which are essentially presented as live workshop or asynchronous handbooks and videos kind of thing. An unstructured, which we have again tested within the communities that we have run, learning circles with same skill level, or learning circles with the standard skill level standard deviation of 1. That seems to work better, and the curated resource and handbooks are given to them so that they have some kind of hand-holding or rails to hold on to when they're like learning by themselves. But irrespective of what path that you choose, a structured learning path usually is faster, and unstructured learning path is a little slower, but like the team becomes really stronger, as we have seen. The output essentially has to be the goal of any learning activity that happens within a community. And the output, could be an NFT or an IP or a good or a service or a proof of concept, or the challenge itself becomes an output, right? So that essentially acts like so there's a line that connects that supply side to the growth, as you can see here. And that means that we have this proof of concept now, which we go and tell to our potential clients who could be on the B2B or the B2C side, through our own content strategy engine, so that we reach the correct target customer. And our job is essentially to get jobs and projects to the community members. The projects are in turn divided into smaller skills-based gigs, and then fed back into the supply side of things. So you're learning, and the output of the learning becomes a showpiece for us to bring projects and jobs into the community. And so that covers your performing time and your learning time. Now, these are two very selfish things. I join, I learn, I perform. But because we have set up everything in the structure of a DAO, which means you're also a stakeholder, like literally you are part of this DAO, right? Like you own a token of this DAO. So what are you doing for that? So you are essentially then getting involved in certain growth processes, skilling processes, and the most important thing is validating people's work who are reporting to you or lesser skilled than you. So this also reduces the way decision making happens within a community, right? So one decision making is who gets jobs and projects, so that we can clearly see if someone has worked on an let's say an IP, and those people have to get a project that is going to be monetized on the demand side. First priority. And the other priority could be through an auctioning system, which we are looking at the last Nobel Prize for Economics, which is double-sided auctioning, that was used for spectrum allocation by governments, and that ended up creating the most equitable and the most efficient way to allocate spectrum. And that's the same thing that will happen here as well. So there is a fixed project, or there is a fixed project as in a project that has certain value. So anyone who are willing to work within that particular value can go and bid for that, get that. Or the other side is the requirement is clear, but the project value isn't clear, then again, like different people will band together, send proposals, and the client gets to choose that. So this kind of removes the barrier of someone who owns more tokens within the community allocating more jobs and projects to the same person, right? So this essentially is the DAOcommons protocol, which is three systems. The skilling system, which starts with having a clarity about the skill leveling, and the growth system, gigs and projects and job system, and the operating system or the validation of work system. From a blockchain standpoint, this is where blocks are getting created. My transactions, which is the activities that I do within a community, and that gets validated and pushed into blockchain. So that's a block, a bunch of transactions getting added together. And we don't need distributed consensus over here because it's all happening very transparently within the community and during the community's town halls. So how can we get involved? You can either upgrade your existing communities into Web3 communities or DAOs. Will be able to help you, or you can build from scratch with us, and we'll start a cohort-based course soon for this. Now, let's go back and understand how it all solves all these problems, right? So like I was saying, so we have the identity where every person who joins our community, once they reach a certain threshold, they get this identity where you have your verification done, your skill levels are validated, that reduces validation friction. You have a bunch of communities that is shown on your identities, so you can always see it reduces search and match friction, right? You won't go to mad about growth for let's say quantum skills like that. So reduces search and match friction. Onboarding and exit friction reduces because we'll be able to have smart contracts between real people with real incentives, and that reduces that. And the DAO, or the community structure, essentially takes care of all the four problems that we talked about. At a clarity of progression level, the skill levels gives clarity of progression very clearly, precisely to the point that you have to learn this much, you have to perform this much, you have to build the community this much. And access to credit and financial services in the same one access, and the second thing is in the same rate at which people who are working at full-time jobs with larger organizations would get. That happens through the well-being score. And the anxiety about future project goes away, because as a community, everyone is striving towards bringing projects and jobs into the community. And that's the whole demand side that's been put into place. And that's in their best interest to do that work. So it's a win-win situation. And no more social reclusion, because you're obviously part of multiple people who are interested in building the skills that you also have or want to have in the future. So just a quick recap, this is the third and the final protocol within the third pillar stack. The value capture essentially says how you have to log your work within a community. And DAOcommons essentially talks about how to structure an organization. The Wellbeing protocol talks about how to take care of the rest of the hours that you have in your life so that you're optimizing for your well-being. And the community exists to help you optimize for your well-being. All right, so that's about it. Let me know if you guys have any questions.